Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, anywhere you are in the world. This is Guinea American University, Cyprus, and the Global Campus for University. We are happy and excited to have you join us this evening over here. It's quite cold. It's been raining all day, so I feel it's part of blessing for the program. And we have two lovely guests here, Dr. Freddie Covington from the US and Mr. Yusuf Odeyoyin from University of Rwanda. I'm really glad to have the two of you here with me this evening. It's a big pleasure for me, for my department, for the institution, and we hope that the information we are going to pass across this evening will be very tangible and important for the population we are targeting. Thank you so much for joining and accepting to be a part of this beautiful event. I leave it open to you to give me some few talks. Thank you so much. Dr. Covington first, please.
For having me. Again, I'm Dr. Frederick B. Covington. I'm an occupational therapist in Washington, D.C. in the United States. My particular practice area is in pediatrics, more so in the school system. I'm a private clinic owner, product developer, app developer, all encompassing the world of occupational therapy. And again, I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And I hope we are going to have a lovely time this evening. Mr. Odeyoyin Yusuf, please, can you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. And then it's a great initiative from the Girne American University. And I quite appreciate the invitation. So I'm Odeyoyin Yusuf Abiodun and an occupational therapist. So I was opportune to practice along different continuum of OT from diploma to BSc and up to where I am today. So presently I'm a lecturer at the University of Rwanda, which is one of the low resource countries in the world, and going back from our past experience and all that. So we are trying to just invest and uplift occupational therapy practice as far as African context is concerned. And that's one of the aim why I'm highly happy to be part of this. So thank you for having me.
That's a pleasure to know. Thank you so much. And I'm your moderator for today. I'm Olatunji Solomon Ola. I'm also an occupational therapist, lecturer, Guinea American University, Occupational Therapy Department. We happen to be the only occupational therapy department in the whole of Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. And the course is offered in English. We are accredited, and we are also working towards the world accreditation for the department, which is in view. So we are glad to have our participants joining us, our viewers all over the world. We are happy to have you here. And I want to quickly tell you that coming to Guinea American University Occupational Therapy Department means you can actually transit from here to other parts of the world to probably do your master's program or to get a job and things like that. Currently, we only have the bachelor's program. We don't have the master's program yet. We only have the bachelor's program, and the department is almost a decade old. So we are quite young, new, and just like a child, we are still developing. And hopefully, we're going to reach our developmental milestones as expected. All right. So today, our topic is occupational therapy as medical rehabilitation and beyond. And this title was born out of the need to address different opinions and views of people who are non-occupational therapists but are meant to be recipients of our services, including students. Because of the peculiarity of the name of the profession, they feel it is not even a medical profession. So today we want to explore and give some few insights into what occupational therapy is and what people don't even know it is. And with me, you already have Dr. Frederick Covington and Mr. Yusuf Odeyoyi, and I will be asking them some few questions, and I hope we are going to enjoy this discussion. So my first question goes to Dr. Frederick. I'm happy you you studied and practicing in the US. So my first question is, how can we express the medical nature of occupational therapy to reflect in the name of the profession for common people? Please, that is the first question for you, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you. That's a very good question. And I think this is something that OT practitioners have to deal with around the world. When any non-medical person thinks of the word occupation, they immediately think of work or a job. And this basic definition is what hinders the knowledge of what occupational therapy is to the public. So by elaborating and continuously educating the public of what an occupation truly is, can bring us from the back of the proverbial healthcare professional line and put us in the front. We must focus on the word occupation and have it encompass the areas it truly covers as noted in various OT practice frameworks. And of course, that would be the 8 activities of daily living, the instrumental activities of daily living, education, play, leisure, social participation, rest and sleep, and of course, what most people already think of it as work. So we must include all of those when we're talking about occupation. We can't just let that basic definition sit in the minds of society. We must further promote that occupational therapy is a holistic profession and that it helps across the lifespan for people to participate in the things that they need to participate in. And so just by elaborating on the true definition of occupation, I think that would help the non-medical society really understand what occupational therapy is.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frederick. I think that is insightful to start with. And I'm going to throw the question also to Mr. Yusuf. How can we express the medical nature of occupational therapy to reflect in the nature of the profession for common people? You have the floor, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful question. What I have to what I have to express in line with that is that if you look at the way we express the profession, it's quite confusing, as Dr. Frederick has said. But on my own perspective, I think the time has come that we need to take it back to contextual based frame. whereby different contexts should come up with how best they can express the professional language of occupational therapy. If I take an example of the francophonists, they use more of ergotherapy, so which is quite easy to understand for them to capture what the core nature of the profession is. So I think it's very good for us now as a therapist to come up with a generic terms that will be specific to each dialect or language. So with that, people, a common man in the market or wherever they are, will be able to understand what we have and what we do and how we do it better. So sometimes back, I remember I had I was part of a session. Even within interdisciplinary practice, some still find it difficult to understand what we do or what we have. And don't be surprised, even the physiotherapists, they still find it uneasy to dissect the real core function of an OT. So that is take even for the young lads, it's giving a lot of challenge in order for them to be able to express the nitty-gritty nature of the profession. So I would say that we need to go back to the contextual based language whereby everybody develop how to express the profession, and same thing should be communicated to professionals so that they know what we do and how we do it better. The ICF model has brought us together, but to some extent the OTPF assists us, but we need to be able to explain the OTPF and the ICF in a common terms, away from the medical broad terms. I think that will assist us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yusuf. I quite agree because over here also, the term they prefer is ergotherapy. And because of this, when you say you're an occupational therapist, they totally dissociate from that function of the profession. And there was a particular hospital I visited here, their physiotherapy department, and I requested, I said, okay, this, the university, the hospital is under a university, and the university offers physical rehabilitation. So I was asking, why don't you offer occupational therapy in your college or in the hospital? And they said, we don't do the same thing. We do totally different thing. And I felt a bit bad. I said, okay, yes, we have a little bit of a difference, but we still have lots of things that associate us together in terms of how we want to care for patients and clients. But then I understand that it was from the fact that the name occupation totally dissociates away from anything medical for them. And that is one of the problems we are facing here. I have quite a few questions. My second question is for Mr. Yusuf Odeyoin, and just permit me as I try to get some things on board. So the second question is going to be contextual, like you said. And you being you being working in Africa and coming from the African roots, I want to ask, what are the major challenges as an African OT for you, maybe educational wise or professional wise? What are the major challenges for you as an African OT? Thank you.
Okay, that is that is quite interesting. They are I have this huge lot of challenges to mention, but I'm not going to draw it upon myself alone. I will just make it a kind of a generic problems that I've seen most of African OTs suffering with. Even drawing from where I was opportune to practice in Nigeria back then in 2012, I mean 2011 to like 2013. So, and then here in Rwanda, if you compare the two contexts, it's quite, we are both African nation, but Nigeria is a developing, and here we are still developing, drawing from our past experience in this country. So that makes it difficult for us in some areas that educationally we have a lot of challenges. And when I say a lot of challenges, it's not as if we don't have a competent hand or we were not trained to understand the profession. But when you are trained to understand the profession in one manner and you don't have adequate infrastructure and equipment that can help your practice to grow or to be communicated well to the wider world, then it's a very big challenge. So on my perspective, the first part of our challenge is education. So our educational resources and the setting as a whole needs to be worked on. And why I'm saying that is that I've learned a big lesson in terms of the way teaching is being considered in recent days as compared to what has happened in the past. So for us now, just assume in 2019, there is this African Regional Congress that we used to have in Africa that bring all of us together. So I was part of it here in Kigali. And one of the major drawback was that, I mean, some team from the US, United States of America, they visited during the program and they came with some textbooks. So just for me to mention, imagine somebody donating Pedretti fourth edition to us, where other people are already working around 8 7 8 edition. So that means we quite appreciate the effort, but that tells that before we will be accessing or have access to that kind of a donation of 8th edition, that will be like 2025 or 2030. So after the world has advanced away from that knowledge. So when I realized that, so I came to in conclusion that it will have been very good if we have more authors, generic authors that are from African specific. If you look at the Western world culture, at this point now, they are talking about high tech. I quite know some of the Dr. Covington's app, the one that I developed on education and that. So for us now that we don't have access to that or limited infrastructure to come up with that concept, so we need something that will be very specific to our nature rather than trying to follow in the Western world, of which we are still not able to catch up. One, financially, we are not able to catch up. Resources based, we are not yet there. So I don't want to see us dragging things along with Western world. Now I try to just peruse some of the search engines today, and I found out that before I only knew about three authored book from Africa. Now it's up to like nine. So we need, especially the young therapists that are coming on board now, we should not rely on the clinical aspect of OT practice alone. So we also need to go more into education and work as a team to author so many books that will speak for us as an Africa. That is the first part. And Solomon can bear witness to this. If you are trained in United States of America, reading all the Western books, now you have two tasks as an occupational therapy practicing in Africa. Number one, you need to understand the nature and the concept behind the author's mind. Second thing, you must be able to bring that author's information to context-based practice. So before you decipher this, there is some miss of information. So what Dr. Covington might design an app for, by the time I will be using it here, I will have removed or altered some of the function in order to suit our practice. So that will not help the outcome of the intervention. So to say, we need more authors from Africa. So that's the first part of the education. The second point that I will raise is on research. We have limited research output as an occupational therapist that practice in Africa. And the reason is because more more OTs in Africa are clinicians. We have very limited, about 10% are the ones in the education. So now this far majority, 90% of the therapists that are clinicians, very limited of them works along with research. What they do mostly is get to the field work, deliver the intervention, get your pay, go back home. So that will not help the professional growth. And it's part of the drawback that the young scholars are having challenges with. So I would say that we need more research output in order to upgrade the professional outcome in Africa. And the clinicians now need to work as a team and come up with so many research base. So the other part of my challenge is innovation. Yes, we are very limited in innovation, and that is still one of the reasons why we are not catching up with the Western world. So I've seen that most of the equipment that we use are usually coming from Western world, if not Canada. Okay, India and China has come on board in recent days, but we also need to bring things down to our context. So the young scholars need to be challenged so that they should come up with different devices, and then probably this can be used to facilitate our intervention in contexts that are very specific to Africa. And then I quite appreciate some few young scholars nowadays that are going into entrepreneurship of OT practice. I think we need that to, you cannot produce a device without nobody to help you to promote it. So if we have more of OT entrepreneur from Africa perspective, this set of people will help the young scholars that will be working along innovation. I know Ola is working with some killer beat. We have some OT, TLR, so many other young scholars are coming up with different entrepreneur sense nowadays, and I think we need to work along with this. So to wrap up my challenges, the first is on education. I have the second will be on infrastructural development. Innovation needs to be worked on, and most importantly, research. We need to proclaim it now, and I mean the output will help us to advance the concept of OT specific to African practice. So these are the few points that I will first raise. Then if there's any cross questions, I can add a few more. Thank you, Solomon.
Thank you so much. So it's quite in-depth, quite in-depth, and I had to jot some things down for learning purpose. And I sincerely agree with majority of the points you gave. For example, the context-based practice has been one of the problems we are facing. And I'm going to also give an example in regards to this. I remembered a young Nigerian OTA asking me, how do we get a job in this country when they don't even know what occupational therapy is? And I understand what he was trying to ask because of the nature of the country. And asking this question showed us a lot of drawbacks in our teaching methods and teaching practices and the lack of innovation, but not just lack of innovation, but I would say maybe political infiltrations by OTs, which is not there yet. And I'm going to be coming back to that because I follow AOTA and I see how much they are pushing for the government and for the politicians, I would say, to look more into lots of grants for occupational therapy as a profession in the US, to establish more occupation-based interventions and in healthcare and in salary and wages. And looking at all those things, it shows we actually have a long way to go contextual-wise. And I'm going to come back to that before we end the session. My next question is for Dr. Frederick.
For a moment.
Yes,
just
thank you.
Chime in on that for a moment. Sorry to interrupt you. But
Okay.
I think there's a parallel between African Americans practicing as well as Africans practicing in the field of occupational therapy. Now, as some may know, the number of Black males in occupational therapy in the United States is actually less than 1%. Per my rudimentary figures, it's about 0.584%. So we are very few as far as Black males in this profession. As far as just African Americans overall, we're about 3 to 5% in occupational therapy. So our voice is very minimal. I think as African Americans can grow and proliferate in the United States, I think many of us will be very willing to lend our voices and skills to, developing African programs, whether it be Rwanda, Nigeria, or what have you. And on a personal note, I know of 3 OTs that have been working in Ghana and actually established an OT clinic there. And I know a couple of others that are also branching out, going to Nigeria and other places. So just to let that be known, if we can grow here, it's my hope and dream that we can grow in other places as well. Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. Thank you so much. In the comment section, someone said, Mr. Salahu Olalekan said that there are misconceptions regarding the use of the name, even by medical practitioners. it is sometimes misleading, and I totally agree with that. It is sometimes misleading when we see the way people actually interpret it, and hopefully we are still going to come back to that. So the next question for Doctor is, what academic changes? I'm happy Mr. Odeyoyi spoke about the nature of teaching and education of occupational therapy in Africa. So what academic changes would set occupational therapy towards drastic global limelight? That is the next question for Doctor. What academic changes would set occupational therapy towards drastic global limelight? Yes, Doctor,
Well,
please.
sure. Thank you for the question. Well, two things come to mind as far as bringing OT into the limelight, and this may be going out on a ledge a little bit. First of all, I think it would be beneficial for um, the profession as a whole that within our educational programs we learn to promote the profession. I'm not saying that this should be a class, but some way or another, intertwined within our educational programs, we should learn to promote the profession. I feel no one is going to do this particular job but ourselves. We can not only be advocates during OT month or a particular rehab month, we have to be advocates throughout the year. Second thing that comes to mind, we have to move as occupational therapists, not only within occupational therapy realms, but within society itself. What's funny, my mother has a saying that the preacher is sometimes preaching to the choir. And what this literally means is that we are sometimes speaking to people that already have the knowledge that we're trying to give out. I believe we as occupational therapists sometimes do the same thing. I feel that sometimes we get into our little OT groups or our little OT clubs and we speak amongst one another. Now, though this is beneficial for us as individual practitioners, it doesn't benefit society nor let them know of the extent of our abilities. So we have to go outside of our occupational therapy circles, and that could be if you're working in the school systems, let's distribute our knowledge to teachers. If we're working on driving, maybe we can link up with driving schools or things of that nature. We have to get outside of our normal OT realm and stop talking amongst one another and talk to society as a whole.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with you, and I'm going to share a little bit of from what you said. So you simply mean we should start talking OT to non-OTs,
Mm-hmm.
and I totally agree with that. I remembered there was a research we were meant to start just before the pandemic about the parents of our students, if they even understand what their children is studying in school, especially the final year students. We intended to have that research, but the pandemic cut it short just about a year ago. But we were able to get few responses from them. And in the Likert scale we use from 1 to 7, the majority of the outcome came with 2. They have little or no knowledge about what occupational therapy is, what occupational therapy means, and what occupational therapy does. And this shows the challenge we are facing now in terms of global identity in occupational therapy. When you go to a particular family who has a medical doctor and you ask them, oh, your son, oh, he's a cardiologist, he works with the heart. Oh, he's a rheumatologist, he works with the bone. Immediately, they can give you an insight into what they do. But based on the little research we did, we realized that even the families don't understand what their children are studying in school or what they can do. And this is this, I believe, is one of the problems we are facing, because I'm going to use example of a student here who is actually very related to a top politician. And this politician happened to have a hard hand injury some times ago, and he's been managed for more than 4 years by a physiotherapist. And the daughter is studying occupational therapy in the school. So I'm just trying to show you. So she graduated and said, my father doesn't even know what I do. So after that, they came and like, okay, we also have a friend with Parkinson's. And unfortunately, the student, the daughter is also our student. So we have like 4 students with parents with some forms of impairment, but are referring themselves or are going to meet the physiotherapist or other forms of therapists like the chiropractors, when their children is actually occupational therapy, is in the occupational therapy profession. So I think that this is also one of the drawbacks we have, because like Mr. Yusuf said, the research, the context we talk about when we look at the OTPF, the environment, within our own immediate environment, they don't even know what occupational therapy is. So because of that, they don't even say to people, oh, my son can work with a man who has been diagnosed with stroke, or can work with a child with learning disability. Oh, my son can work in this and that. And because of that, we are struggling contextual wise, and it's one of the reasons we are finding it hard to get jobs. But thank you so much for that insight. My next question is still for you, Dr. Frederick. And the question is, how does social media help the profession? That's the first part of the question. And the second one is digital age and occupational therapy. What is your view? And I want you to give me 2 views, a view from a developed country and a view from a developing country. Thank you. You have the floor.
That's a good question. As far as occupational therapy and social media, I think a lot of people have access to the social media platforms, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, what have you. I think this is an excellent way for occupational therapy to proliferate. But going back to an earlier point that I was making, we just can't make videos for occupational therapists. Personally speaking, I try to make videos to further the education of occupational therapists. However, I would say probably 70% of the videos that I make are made for parents and teachers to enlighten them about what occupational therapy does. I've recently been talking with a lot of teachers, and their original idea of occupational therapy before connecting with me on social media was that occupational therapists come into the school and they work on handwriting. That's it. Handwriting, nothing else. But after I've talked to them, they know that we work on the ergonomics of the child sitting in the desk. We work on sensory integration. We work on visual perceptual skills. We work on fine motor skills. We work on gross motor skills. We're not only in the classroom, but we're also on the playground. If that child isn't able to grasp a pencil and write on the desk, is that child going to be able to play on the gym set when they're trying to go from bar to bar? We're still looking at that fine motor skills and strength in the hand. So being able to connect with these teachers and others outside of the occupational therapy world via social media is a good way to communicate what we do and bring a further understanding to society as a whole. And I think that's my viewpoint in regards to developed countries. Now, for those that are developing, the second part of your question, the educational videos that I try to put out, I have a lot of discussion on those. What I do notice is that I may post a video on, let's say, the first of the month in a particular country that's not the U.S. I may not get feedback from that particular video until the 15th of the month, though I have posted it on the first. So there's a delay somewhere in that. However, I still think it's beneficial for me to post and advocate and try to continue the education of those practicing therapists abroad. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, to a large extent, it does. It does to a large extent. Thank you for that. And the next question, and I want our viewers to know that if they have questions, they can actually please put their questions down. This session is just for 1 hour. We are 35 minutes gone. So if you have questions, please, viewers, you can put your questions. I'm going through them, and when it's 15 minutes to the end of the session, if we have any question, I am going to read it out and we are going to deliberate on it. So please, if you have questions, dear viewers, you can kindly post your questions and we will view it before the session is over. All right, the next question is for Mr. Yusuf. We've been talking about occupational therapy as medical rehabilitation and beyond. So I want to ask another question on the beyond. And the question is, why should we look beyond occupational therapy as a medical rehabilitation profession? Why should we look beyond occupational therapy as a medical rehabilitation profession? You have the floor, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. But before I dive into that particular question, I would just like to add a few points to what the value of OT as far as social media is concerned. In my based on my own perspective and experience so far, there are some actually countries, and don't be surprised that even social media accessibility is still very much limited.
Mhm.
So when we think of that, especially where I find myself today, we are a very low resource country, so to say, and that there are some remote areas within this country that patients find it difficult to access social media. Imagine when somebody will be living on 100 MB for a week. So you don't expect such a person to be, even if they see anything on Facebook, they flip through. They don't wait to even play the videos. So we tend to use more of community engagement. So by working more with posters, banners, with so many organizations like Handicap International, ICRC, all those organizations are around. So we do more with posters and community engagement in order to get the message to the real people that need the therapist the most. But in the city of Kigali, here now, we internet and everything is not a problem. So social media is accessible better than other side of the country. So that's what I want to say about that. Now, why do we have to look beyond? Well, most of the therapists, right from school, I've noticed that they are stopped with clinical based practice of OT. And the main reason was because of the fact that majority of the educational resources are developed around clinical nature of OT. So there is none of us that actually passed through. Okay, I don't know, probably in the Western world, but throughout my training so far, I've never had any placement as far as correctional service is concerned. So that tells that I might not have any good scope as related to that. It doesn't mean that I've seen it in the book that OT exists or OT practice extend to that point. But because I was not exposed to it, that would give me a very big drawback. So in terms of my own competency, I might not be so much buoyant. Even when I see a job opportunity in that setting, I will not want to go because by and large, I might think I don't know what to do. So that's also it's applicable to most other therapists. So the curriculum of OT as a whole needs to be restructured. This is drawback to probably WFOT, the AOTA, and every association of each country needs to come up with what suits them. I'm just repeating that again and again. So if the curriculum is worked on that speaks beyond clinical practice of OT, I'm very sure far majority of the therapists will look beyond the medical aspect of the profession. So a good scope needs to be established as far as the correctional service is concerned. The adaptation and the environmental modification part of OT, we need to work along with other biomedical engineers and all those sort of people to expand our scope of practice. We are not only supposed to be doing range of motion and all those play activities in the clinical setting alone and school. We need to move into the home adaptation settings and all that. Also, more of OT, I said it at the beginning of my talk, that more OTs need to go into entrepreneurship. Yes, we need it. Part of what is giving us a challenge today is because of the fact that we have the industry separate from OT. So more OTs are being employed to engage in other settings in order to work to aid their particular development. Rather, we need to go into entrepreneurship part of the profession, not just owning a clinic like what most people does in Africa nowadays. We need to work more, I mean, based on entrepreneurship and organization, where we develop a product and we should be able to market it to the global world. Let me give you a scenario. The same in 2019. That was actually my first OTAG congress that I attend so far. So I was expecting a kind of a competition whereby people display variety of equipment, gadget, and all that. And at least from there, the young scholars that are there can pick some knowledge as far as the function is concerned and take it forward. Even some people might be opportune and they have a contract signed and all that. But the organizer make a provision for that. I think maybe one or two therapists presented a device. What device? Just splinting. So it was quite unfortunate. And I was like, if this is where we are to this moment, then when are we going to take it forward to the next level? So that tells that if to say that our sense of entrepreneurship is to where we are supposed to be, for sure, we should have more people into that direction. So to cut the long story short, OT needs to move. I mean, the curriculum of OT needs to be restructured to reflect other area of placement away from clinical settings. So I'm proposing correctional service, a good scope needs to be developed in that area. Work and industry, entrepreneurship and organizational practice of OT, adaptations, home modification settings, and all that. The scope needs to be vast extended beyond the clinical aspect of management. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yusuf. That's very detailed. Some few weeks ago, I met an occupational therapist on Instagram by the Instagram name OT and Chill. He's an African occupational therapist, I think in the UK or the US, I'm not sure. And he works in the correctional facility. He works in the prison. And he was telling me some of his experiences as regards to prison and alcohol dependent prisoners and different other things with depression and post-traumatic stresses that comes with forensic occupational therapy. And while he was explaining, I told him there was a period I had interest in military and prison or correctional facilities related therapies. And from what he said, what I really understood there is, how do you even manage people whose hope is lost? And it gave me a lot of thinking to do in real life, because even I remember he said something like, even sometimes himself finds out that he's getting lost in the process, and he uses them as an example to live his day-to-day life and to use their experience to correct himself and some of his behaviors and his reactions and actions. So I totally agree with you that we need lots of changes in occupational therapy. And I'm trying to check the questions coming from someone, which I'm going to read very soon. But before then, I have a generalized question. And this is a question I was having a conversation with my dean, and my dean happens to be a woman. She's a fanatic of occupational therapy, even though she's not an occupational therapist, and she canvassed for the setting up of this department. And okay, so in our discussion, she said, how do you people compete? What is the prestige behind your profession? That was the question she asked. She's worked with, she studied in the UK, so she's worked with a lot of occupational therapists in the UK, and that was one of the reasons behind starting the department some years ago. So she asked that question: how do we compete? What is the prestige behind our profession? So I'm throwing it out to both Dr. Frederick and Mr. Yusuf. So how do we compete with the medical doctors, with the surgeons, with the should I say biomedical engineers, with the innovationists, with the inventors? How do we compete with them? And from my own personal view, in the social world, I'm going to be very plain with you. I have a student who once asked me, "Sir, I know a friend who works at the gambling institution, and he earns 3 times more than you. Why should I still study occupational therapy when I can get it in the gambling places?" And this shows how much of social pressure is there, even for the OT student. So that is my question. How do we compete? First, in the medical society, and second, in the social society. What is our prestige? So please, I'm opening the floor for you to answer the question. Uh, I don't know who is going to answer first.
Okay, I'll jump out there.
Thank you.
When you say how do we compete, I have a different viewpoint on that. I don't necessarily think that it's a competition, so to speak. I think we need to learn to stay in our lane and be confident in what we do. Because we're not surgeons. There's no way we can compete with that. We're not physical therapists. I don't think there's an actual competition. I think if we understand our value and what we actually bring to the table, that we will grow and proliferate that way. Because I look at occupational therapy like this. If I had to compare professions, there's nothing else that I would choose, because occupational therapy touches on everything which a surgeon can't do, a physical therapist can't do, a biomedical engineer can't do. We touch on a client's life from the cradle all the way to the grave, whether it's in a NICU or if it's in a geriatric facility. There's no other profession that can say that they do that. And we, touch on the lives of our clients in educational settings, in leisure settings, in rest and sleep. So our opportunity to grow and be influential and being an entrepreneur on a business aspect is unlimited, because, like I was saying, we touch on everything. Let's take sitting in this chair, for instance. I can come up with an occupational therapy based business on ergonomics with this desk and this chair that I'm sitting at. Let's take me looking at this screen and reading from left to right. I can come up with some type of program that enhances my visual perceptual skills. I think many of us don't realize our true potential. And sometimes I think that makes us think that we are competing with other professions, where I think we could actually be the highlight of medicine. And that's my answer on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Yusuf, do you have something you want to tell us regarding that?
Yes. I will first of all support what Dr. Frederick just mentioned. It's not purely, it's not a competition. You cannot compete with other professionals. Everybody have their own jurisdiction of practice. So what I always advocate for my own student and then people around me is that let's try to understand the scope of OT practice. When you are well groomed in the scope of OT practice, and you make sure that you take your intervention along the continuum of that, all you need from other medical personnel is just the space and avenue for you to explore. And I will give you a scenario. There was a time I was in a meeting, and okay, sorry, a particular therapist was sent during our last year OT day. So we tried to do some community mobilization and clinical mobilization so that we can expand our scope to some hospitals that are not yet having the service of OT, which could be another way of getting job. I mean, sourcing for job for our therapists here. So a lady therapist visited was posted to one particular orthopedic hospital, and there is this physiotherapy there. He has been saying it to thousands of OTs that no OT can convince him of relevance of OT anywhere in the whole world. So this person was looking for a way to convince that particular person. So my response was that if you waste your whole month trying to convince one person about how relevant you are in the medical world or in the social world, definitely you're not going to achieve anything. Somebody have already preoccupied his mind that nobody can convince him that OT is relevant. So what I said is that you go there, just tell him, sir, I need a space, give me a space, and I need this particular equipment to function with. Give me an opportunity to work with your patient. I will take responsibility of whatever it is. Then try and discharge your duty from what he will see you doing. Probably that conviction that you are looking for sure, the patient will go back to him and tell him, oh, thanks to the occupational therapist, I'm now able to do this and that. So that's all you need, not to be convincing somebody. The other experience that I also want to mention relating to that, myself and as other senior therapists, we visited a particular one of the top hospitals here, and a senior physiotherapy said it to us that he has not seen us cutting papers or doing some paper matches, some paperwork. So we were surprised. I said, in this 21st century, somebody is still expecting me to be cutting newspapers and be doing some paper mache hat and all that. So I asked him, why do you want us to go back to that particular lane that OT has advanced or evolved away from that? Then he said he has worked with one particular OT from Zimbabwe or Malawi. He mentioned the country that all what she does is about papers. So I was a bit even confused, like, okay, what do I have to tell them? I said, okay, fine, probably that's how she understands the profession. So if what she does, it's okay with you and she was able to deliver, you give us an opportunity also to apply our own concept here. And at the end of the day, you can see if what we discharge works or not. So we are not here to come and compete with papers or whatever we can do. So it's not a competition. We just need to understand our scope of practice and try to stay in that lane. So part of what we can do to do that is that like this particular program now, it's an avenue to explore ideas and opinion. So such can be involved in different parts of the world where the knowledge of OT scope of practice is well detailed. And I can tell you, most therapists, especially junior therapists, still find it difficult to understand how to implement the scope of practice. And that's why most times we are the one that leaves our profession and we deal more with range of motion exercise and all those things that makes physiotherapy to start competing or having issues with us at different clinical settings. So we need to work based on our scope of practice. That's what I think should be done as of now. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that was actually in depth. That was in depth. So, even though I still have few more questions, but because we have to interact with our audiences, there are some questions I think we can also see them on the YouTube page. I'm sorry, my YouTube isn't responding yet. I'm trying to get a different connection. So just pardon me, I'm going to read out the question and like a comment, then we go from there. We have 5 more minutes. So I'm going to read out the question and we can go. So, sorry, just pardon me, please. So the question or the comment is, an occupational therapist must be present in state health institutions. Such approaches help the popularization and recognition of occupational therapy education. Would you agree with this view? Personally, I do agree, but what is Dr. Frederick's response to this? I can read it again.
Please
An
do.
OT must be an OT must be present in the state health institutions. Such approaches help the popularization and recognition of occupational therapy education. Would you agree with this view?
Yes, I would. To be in these particular, I guess, governmental realms, I think that uh, lend support to the profession because we're kind of being acknowledged in those settings. And to a lot of people in society, if a state institution or a governmental institution acknowledges something, it gives it credence. So I do believe that would be, I do agree with that statement that it would be beneficial as far as the growth of the occupational therapy profession.
All right, Mr. Yusuf, please, do you have something? We have to be very fast now.
Yeah. I do agree with that. We need to cut across all continuum of governmental parastatals. That's where we can make things happen. And far majority of our patients are actually located within that particular continuum. So I agree. Definitely. We are supposed to.
All right. So the next question is, can occupational therapy really advance beyond arts and craft? Can art be completely removed from OT practice in some settings? Please, should I repeat the question?
Um, no, I think I can speak on that.
Okay.
I don't think the creativity or the arts and crafts aspect should be actually removed totally. I think being able to mix our science-based knowledge and our creativity is one of the key elements in having a successful OT career. I find that some of the most successful occupational therapists are able to combine these two areas. They're not totally on the science side, only having in mind those courses that we took in school, the neurology, the kinesiology, the musculoskeletal anatomy. They're not just on that science end, and they're not completely on the creative or the artistic side, doing all the paperwork and the leather work and the painting or the arts and crafts. I think we have to be able to not only make our sessions medically beneficial, but it also has to be entertaining and enjoyable as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Mr. Yusuf, please, do you have a contribution to that?
No way, it's just a very brief contribution. I don't agree with that particular statement. So, what we need is advancement in all what we do. And I quickly want to make a particular story about that. I was involved in a particular research on how to use 3D printing ahead of printing fabrication, sometimes last year. So that tells that drawing away from paper pattern cutting before splinting. So the author is just trying to advance that to 3D printing. So same thing can comes up into the arts field of practice, but taking it away completely will not be acceptable at this moment. The activity have to be enjoyable, as Dr. Frederick said. So we just need
All right.
advancement.
All right. Okay, so that is all the question we have from our viewers. We have 1 minute or so. So now I will be asking us some personal questions, just one personal question from my own perspective and from some of the things that are happening around OT. and from my background as an African occupational therapist, and it is, what are the first few steps we must assume in order to easily create jobs and get jobs? I know we have talked about entrepreneurship, and I remembered over here when we were trying to do some few things in regards to that, we had some block holes and we have some restrictions, and I got to understand some few things. So that's my first question. What are the first few steps we must assume to create jobs and to get jobs?
Speaking on the entrepreneurial aspect, um, we can create jobs that's not necessarily seen as occupational therapy based. Um, I think some of us may think that whatever job we create, it must be, let's say, for instance, the occupational therapy daycare center. Whereas I know of therapists that have created daycare centers that base it around child development and what they learned in occupational therapy schooling, whereas it's not actually called an occupational therapy daycare center. It's just a daycare center. So I think we can create um, our own pathway and our own jobs by just basically using the knowledge that we obtain through school and trying to fulfill the needs of society by using that occupational therapy knowledge, if I'm being clear.
All right, all right. Yes, you are. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Yusuf, sir, please, can you
Uh,
add something to that?
okay. So, in my own personal view, I think at this point, there are so many ways in which we can actually create job opportunities. But the one that topped the list for me is that more effort needs to be put on the aspect of the associations that govern occupational therapists in different countries. In some standard, I mean, in some Western countries, I believe things are working fine. But when it comes to other part of the world, like where I find myself now, we need more of association based promotion because is every country has their own policy and from what I experienced here, for instance, you cannot practice outside the box of the association and you cannot practice without a tarification process, so which is one thing that give us a big drawback. No center is even ready to employ OT without tarification, so that makes more of the therapists not to get a good payable job because every patient hears so far there is a standard policy by the government through the Ministry of Health. So whatever service you deliver, whichever way you do it, it has to be taxable and insurance should be able to cover it. So just imagine how can we tax for autism charges? So are you going to charge sensory integration separate and you charge for education separate and behavioral modification separate or something like that? So it becomes a confusing scenario, but they demanded for it. So that takes us back that we have to find a way around it and mitigate the whole situation. So I believe if things can work fine based on different association base, more job opportunities can be created and more therapists will be into job. And they have to look beyond clinical aspect of OT.
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the response. I remembered when I was speaking with my dean some few months ago regarding creating jobs for some of our graduates right on the island. And one of the things I remember she said was that when they wanted to start up this department itself, what they presented to the school was profitability, purpose, and um, reduced cost of service for people with impairments or disabilities. And when the school saw this, and they had to browse and see what is going on online as regards to occupational therapy, and they realize that yes, it can actually be profitable to the school. So I think I'm also going to pick from that profitability. A particular organization in my country wanted to start OT and said that when this person presented to them, what the person presented to them was that at the end of a year, they can actually make from occupational therapy departments alone, they can make around ₦1 million. That was what the person presented to them. And the person showed the purpose and how they are going to go about it and how it is also going to reduce the cost. So I think that for us to start getting more jobs, we need to start actually putting out the profitability as profits associated with occupational therapy as a profession. I think it's going to help us a lot. And well, this is where we would come to a close. We have already used extra 5 minutes. I'm enjoying the session. I could go on for the next 2 hours, but for some, we still have restrictions over here, and the lockdown is still partial. So before we say a good night, I just want to ask us, what would you give us as a token or as a word of advice from your experience? Quickly, sir. Dr. Frederick, what would you give us as a form of advice from your experience?
If I had to give any advice to occupational therapists, I would say that all OTs must understand that their learning never stops. We must be able to openly and willingly take our places as what I call continual students. We learn from the students that we teach, we learn from our patients, we learn from other medical professionals in other fields, and we learn as research continues to change in our own field. For instance, as research has grown, our collective knowledge about sensory integration, we must understand those changes and let that help us grow. Because at the end of the day, the occupational therapist that graduated in 2001 and the occupational therapist that graduated in 2011 and that occupational therapist that's going to graduate in 2021, we all must be on the same accord. I think that will help us grow because I've come into scenarios where you have your old school OT saying this, you have your current practicing OT saying one thing, then you have your new therapist citing new research. I think we all need to come together and be on one accord and let the growth of the profession just carry through all of us, no matter when we've come out of school, that we just have to continue to be continual learners.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Yusuf, sir, please, I need you to
Okay.
also give your
So
comment.
in my
Thank
own
you.
perspective, and what I will say as a concluding point is that occupational therapist practitioners should try as much as possible to focus more on the scope of practice in order to make the difference, because this will reduce the confusion sense and everybody can understand what you do differently. The second point there is that our profession, I mean, our practitioners should try as much as possible not to not to sell out the profession by not able to explain it in the context-based language. So to say, I will reinforce that people should try and define OT from the perspective of the way they communicate with the patient. If a therapist is able to do that, I'm very sure that the outcome of your intervention will always be great. So I think these are the few points that I would draw as a conclusion. So our therapists should just try and emulate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really been a big pleasure having you on board today. I know it's not easy, there's no time, and we would have even loved to have more, but the time and the schedule for everyone is very difficult. So for our viewers, thank you so much for the comments, for the questions, for the contributions. It shows that we actually have lots to celebrate together, and that with continued support of one another, we would even be better. So I'm going to leave us with a word for young OTs, especially. I'm also a very young OT. And that is, we are in Generation Z. We are talking about, Mr. Yusuf talked about contextual based practice. Now, if we look at the context of our world now, it's very virtual, which means you can even meet the president of a country virtually. You can meet the head of a clinical service virtually. You can meet the medical director of an hospital virtually. So my advice is, this social media age has actually given us ease of access to some people. I remembered while I was in India, I wanted to meet a particular man. I think Dr. Frederick would know him, Hewlett Smith, the owner of Rehab Store in US. He's also an occupational therapist. And I've been trying to link up with him a long time, and I couldn't. But one day, I've sent him a series of messages on Instagram, I think in 2017. And last year, he actually responded that, oh, let us have a meeting. I'm sorry, I really do not use Instagram now. I'm just coming. And these are some of the people I also look up to. And putting this in perspective, I think we have come to a point where to even get these jobs, to get better in OT, to link up with more people, you can start using the social media. I think is a contextual kind of practice I really appreciate now. And this is my own contribution to the session. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Frederick, it's a privilege. Mr. Yusuf, sir, it's a privilege. Thank you so much for honoring the invite. To all our viewers, thank you so much. We are so blessed to have you. And I wish you a very lovely Wednesday, a very lovely night ahead. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night rest.